Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Right, good morning and welcome to the first Planning Development Management Committee of 2021 on the 21st of January. Sorry, I thought somebody said something. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. And all attendees switch off their microphones and cameras when not speaking. Microphones and cameras should only be used and switched on when you're invited to speak to the convener. I will now ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of the members participating today, and if all members can confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, that this is clear for the recording and then for the minute of the meeting for the clerk. As the committee is a quasi-judicial sorry folks, I'm having a I can't read my own writing. As the committee contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the room or meeting during consideration of any application. If you're required to leave the room, please make the clerk aware in the chat. Anybody wishing to speak on any item, please use the facility of raising your hand. I'll now pass over to Ms. McBain, please.
Thank you, convener. So I'll just do a quick roll call to make sure members are in attendance. So Councillor Bolton.
Here.
Councillor Stewart.
Here.
Councillor Allen.
Present.
Councillor Cook. Councillor Copeland.
Here.
Councillor Cormie.
Here.
Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
And Councillor Malik.
Here.
Thank you. I think Councillor Cook was having issues with his sound.
Yes, saw a little note come up.
I don't know if Councillor Hendrickson wants to substitute in the meantime.
Well, he's going. Councillor Cook's going to leave and rejoin, so we'll maybe just pause just for a minute to let Councillor Cook come back in before we start.
Okay.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, I can see the top of your head actually. Okay, that's great. I'm glad you've been able to join us. Okay, right, we'll just get on to the agenda, folks. So at item 1.1, we've got the motion against officers from recommendation procedural note on pages 5 to 6. Moving on to the determination of urgent business at 2.1, there is none. Is there any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll take that as a no. Okay, if we could move on to the minutes of the previous meeting at item 4.1, which are on pages 9 to 28. That's the committee meeting of the 10th of December 2020. And we agree that that's an accurate minute. Again, I'm not seeing any indications otherwise. Thank you, folks. Moving on to the committee planner. Now, we've just got a couple of updates to give you folks in terms of predetermining hearings. And Mrs. McBain, could I get you just to update the committee?
Thanks, convener. Yes, so I've issued a notification to all members, so there'll be a predetermination hearing on the Thursday the 25th of February, starting at 10 for the Silverburn House application. And we're in the process of just finalising the details for the Bing Hill House application, so I'll let members know in due course about that. But we're looking to have them both by the same method as this, so by Microsoft Teams rather than in the chamber. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. McBain. And the other 3 reports are actually on the agenda. Okay, right, moving on to the recommendations, where is one of approval. Sorry, John. Sorry,
yeah, sorry, I had a question on the planner. And it's just that obviously there isn't anything on the planner for this committee to look at the absurd decision of Historic Environment Scotland to list 8 blocks of flats, and really for the benefit of any members of the public who might be watching the recording, I wonder if officers could just explain that there are legal reasons why this committee can't address that issue, but other council committees could do so.
Okay. I'll take Mrs. Beattie, and I was going to, Mrs. Beattie was going to address the committee on this item actually just at the end, but we'll bring it in now. So Mrs. Beattie, could you perhaps advise the committee on this situation?
Thank you, convener. I'm aware that this is obviously a hot topic, as the announcement was just made this week. However, this is one of those cases where we have to be mindful that as councillors, you're wearing two hats here. You're wearing a hat as the council, but also a hat as the council as planning authority. So the implications of the listing and any potential appeal are to be dealt with by the council as the landowner rather than the council as planning authority, because as you're all aware, in other cases where sometimes the council is the developer, it's very important that that sort of division between your decision-making role and that quasi-judicial role is respected in terms of decisions you'll have to make on any subsequent applications for listed building consent that may come as a result of the listing. So we have been aware that this is obviously this announcement was due, and that will most likely be dealt with by a report by the corporate landlord at the City Growth and Resources Committee.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Beattie. I think, Councillor Cook, you'll probably recall that a referral was made to us from the City Growth when it was originally indicated for the listing, and we obviously declined to endorse, if you like, what came out of City Growth because of the very nature that we're the planning committee as opposed to part of the kind of the normal council committee structure. So you might recall that going back, but certainly, as I say, Mrs. Beattie was going to update the committee. Is there anything further, Councillor Cook, that you wanted to ask on that?
No, that's it, convener. Yeah, I do recall it. I couldn't remember the date, but I did eventually find it was the 23rd of January last year when we had that legal advice. So, and apologies for putting a spanner in the works of the raising it now rather than waiting for Mrs. Beattie to raise it again, because I'd asked officers for some guidance on this and got some very helpful guidance. So
no, that's fine, Councillor Cook. It's no problem at all. Thank you.
I realise in saying the decision was absurd, I've now ruled myself out of any further listed building consent applications on that one. Okay. But I've already made my view clear.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Okay, as I say, if we could move on to item 6.1, where we have detailed planning permission for the demolition of existing industrial units and a erection of a 5-6-storey building to form 33 flats, units 1, 2 and 3 of Union Glen, Aberdeen, on pages 31 to 68, planning reference 191857. If I could hand over to the planning officer, Mrs. Forbes.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my screen with you. Is that showing for everyone now?
It's not showing yet, but it could just be a slight. Still not there, Jane.
Is it?
No.
No.
No. And unfortunately, not being technical, I can't even offer you any help.
Just a second and I'll try again.
Thanks, Jane. There has been problems with the system, so it could just be that. But put my camera off too.
Bear with me.
Oh, I think you might be, well, coming.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah,
Jane.
right. Thank you. So this application is item 6.1 on the agenda, is for detailed planning permission for the erection of a 5- to 6-storey residential development of 33 flats within a site which is currently occupied by 3 industrial units and lies on the south side of Union Glen at a distance of some 25 metres to the east of the Holborn Street Bridge. To take you to the location plan. So the site lies within a mixed-use area within the city centre and is currently occupied by 3 industrial business units, which would be demolished to allow for the proposed development. The site is somewhat enclosed on 3 of its 4 boundaries, with flatted properties to the east and west, and Willowbank retail park and car parking to the south. To the north, across Union Glen, there's a 4-storey flatted development, an area of car parking and a 3-storey office building which fronts onto Holborn Street. There's some planning history to the site, with an application previously granted conditional consent at committee in August 2015 for the demolition of the industrial units and for the erection of a 4 to 7-storey 71-room apart hotel. The proposal before you is for the erection of a flatted development of 33 units comprising 4 linked blocks, with the main 6-storey block fronting north onto Union Glen and remaining 3 blocks of 5 and 6 storeys in height extending south within the site. The applicant has confirmed their intention for the development to be 100% affordable. The application has been referred to Planning Development Management Committee as it has been subject of 11 letters of objection. In summary, the issues raised largely focus on parking and the impact on existing amenity as set out in pages 48 to 50 of the agenda and addressed within the report. In terms of statutory consultees, all comments are provided on pages 45 to 48 of the agenda. A number of consultees sought conditions be applied should the application be supported, but no objections were raised to the proposal. This includes in relation to flooding, where SEPA was consulted and confirmed they had no objection nor concerns with the proposal on flood risk grounds. They confirmed there was no record of flooding on the site and did not consider the proposed development would adversely affect flood risk elsewhere. The Roads Development Management team were satisfied with the detail contained within Drainage Impact Assessment relating to surface water drainage. With regards to noise, Environmental Health Service were consulted and they commented on the noise impact assessment. They were satisfied with the mitigation measures that were identified relating to sound insulation and mechanical ventilation for the rooms that are overlooking Union Glen to address traffic noise issues from Holborn Street. So the key issues in considering the proposal against all relevant local development plan policy are whether the principle of development is acceptable, the scale and design of the development, the impact of development on existing amenity, and whether an appropriate residential amenity is achievable for future residents, and finally parking accessibility. So in terms of the principle of development, the site lies within a city centre location. It's predominantly residential in nature. Policy NC1 of the local development plan states that development within the city centre must contribute towards the delivery of the vision for the city centre as a major regional centre, as expressed in the Aberdeen City Centre Master Plan. So one of the key aims of the City Centre Master Plan is to support a living city for everyone, and this includes through the delivery of quality housing within the city centre, which this proposal would support. I'll just take you to the site layout plan. So in terms of the scale and design of development, the proposed layout has taken into account the constrained nature of the site, including the change in ground level to the south. The development would be arranged around a private central courtyard area with access to communal stairs and a lift via 2 main entrances off Union Glen. Internal bin storage and cycle parking has been accommodated, again with direct access from Union Glen. The proposed development incorporates a staggered building line on all 4 elevations with flat and monopitched roof designs. It has seen some amendments since the initial submission, with some minor adjustments. The proposed external finishes include a buff-coloured brick facing, smooth buff-coloured render, light grey rain screen cladding and dark grey aluminium windows and doors. So I'll just take you on to the north elevation of the proposed development. So whilst accepting that the 5 to 6 storey development will be prominent from certain viewpoints within the surrounding area, its height does align with the 6-storey tenement building to the west and would rise just 1 storey above the 4-storey flatted development to the east. Part of the northern elevation fronts across Union Glen to a 4-storey flatted property to the north. However, with a minimum separation distance of some 12.3 metres between the buildings and a backdrop to the west of the existing 6-storey tenement, it is considered that the proposed development would not appear overly dominant within the wider street scene. I'll just take you through the remaining elevational drawings. So here we're looking at the south elevation, and again a further image of the south elevation, and this takes into account the existing retaining wall along the southern boundary, and this would be the view from the Willowbank Retail Park to the south. And finally, this is the west elevation. This takes into account and shows here and here the existing retaining wall again, and the separation distance which there would be between that retaining wall along the southern boundary and development within the site. So the overall scale and design of development is considered appropriate for the site in the context of the city centre location, with the proposal incorporating a number of positive design elements. So in terms of residential amenity and impact on amenity, it is considered that following amendments to the layout and design of the development, a suitable amenity can be achieved for future residents. All units would be delivered with dual aspect, and an increased separation between the rear elevations of the development and the southern boundary of the site allows for adequate daylight and sunlight to all the units. A well-enclosed private area of amenity space would be delivered within the courtyard area to the benefit of future residents. In terms of the impact of the proposed development and existing amenity, it is considered that the proposed flat would be more compatible with the surrounding properties, which are predominantly in residential use, than the existing industrial and storage distribution use of the site. It is accepted that the scale of development is such that there would be a degree of additional overshadowing of neighbouring properties, with the building opposite to the north of the site likely to be most affected. However, elevational sun shadow not be of a scale that would have a continuous significant impact on existing daylighting to this property. Rather, it would predominantly be affected in the winter months. It is also considered that the proposed window openings are suitably positioned to ensure a limited degree of overlooking with no private amenity space affected. Although those windows located in the northern elevation would face towards part of the southern frontage of the flatted properties opposite, their outlook would be across Union Glen, a public road, and therefore have limited impact on existing privacy. Finally, in terms of parking accessibility, the proposal is for a no-car development, with the exception of 2 accessible car parking spaces located in the western corner of the site. The Roads Development Management team raised no objection or concerns with the proposal. They confirmed the site lies within a controlled parking zone and that the no-car element accords with current policy, given the city centre location of the site and the ease of access for pedestrians, cyclists and for public transport use. This was subject to delivering appropriate mitigation in the form of cycle parking facilities within the site and securing contributions towards the enhancement of the car club. In that respect, secure parking for 33 cycles is proposed, along with contributions to the car club, which will be through the agreement. Contributions would allow car club membership packs and a level of credit for future residents and support the future enhancement of the existing car club provision in the city. So I'll just take you through some photos, site photos, which will give you a better idea of the context of the application site. So here we can see the site facing south, and you'll notice the single wall and below retail parking to the rear of that, to the south. Here facing east, units in sight. Here looking southwest and taking into account the existing tenement building to the west,
Jane,
and property
yeah,
to the east.
I think you're speaking quicker than your slides are coming up.
Sorry?
I think you're speaking faster than the slides are coming up.
Oh, sorry. Have you got the southwest elevation now? The southwest site photo now?
Yes, we have. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so facing southwest, looking on to the existing site layout with the 2 units, third to the rear. Here you'll note the 6-storey tenement property, residential in use, and the to the east of the site, the 4-storey residential property. And finally here, so is that looking facing west now? If you've got that slide.
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So here, as I say, facing west, looking across Union Glen from the site towards the 4-storey flatted property opposite this, one parking area in between, and the 3-storey office building, and then beyond that to the west onto Holborn Street. Finally, I'll let you see them take you. There are a couple of visuals which the architect has produced. Has that come up on the screen?
Yes, it has. Thank you.
So again, facing east here from Holborn Street, looking onto the proposed development, and finally here facing west gives you an appreciation of the street scene that would result as from the proposed development. Can you see that facing west?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, it is worth reiterating at this point that although the application site lies within the city centre, the applicant has confirmed that they are not seeking to take advantage of the affordable housing waiver. Rather, it should be noted that whilst the proposal would deliver a minimum of 25% affordable units, the applicant has clearly indicated their intention to deliver 100% of the units as affordable. Officers have concluded that the proposal would suitably accord with the relevant provisions of the local development plan for the reasons set out in today's report. It's considered that the proposed development would deliver good quality housing for future residents, and what is somewhat unusual for a city centre location, this would include a good quality and generous area of amenity space on the south side of the site. The recommendation is for members to express their willingness to approve, subject to a number of conditions, as indicated within the report, subject to the conclusion of a legal agreement in relation to affordable housing and to secure developer obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Forbes. Questions for officers? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll just give it a minute. Oh, wait a minute, I've got Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was interested to note there was nothing about disability access or anything I could see. Did you, any comments on that?
Excuse me, I can't hear Councillor
No.
Copeland.
Can you speak
I'm
closer?
sorry, I can't hear.
Can you hear me now? You know,
Yeah. I can hear you. Councillor Copeland's asked about disabled access.
Okay, thank you.
Disabled access.
Yes.
Okay. The access to the rear of the property, there are two accessible car parking spaces, and access to the property from those accessible car parking spaces would be via the courtyard, and there is a lift which again provides access from the courtyard at ground floor level to all levels within the building.
thank you. The other thing was, I mean, I know it's a no-car development, but there's no disabled parking facility at all in the area, is there?
There's two spaces, Councillor Copeland, for disabled.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Jennifer Stewart and then Councillor Cormie.
Thank you, convener. A couple of questions, please. The first is about the affordable housing. If the whole block is to be affordable housing, what price range is that? Could you remind me, please? That would be my first question. Should I give the second one, or should I get an answer?
Sorry, the price range for
The affordable
Properties
housing.
for affordable housing. If it's all affordable, what would be the price range for that?
I'm afraid I'm not aware of what that price range would be. I'm not sure whether anyone else can assist on that.
Sure that perhaps we would have that at this stage.
No, the reason I ask that, convener, is that you know, we're often, I think the word affordable housing is often put to us as an enticement, or that's how it seems to me. But you know, affordable is, you know, what's one's affordable for one person wouldn't necessarily be affordable for another. Perhaps someone can come back to me with what they anticipate that might be. The other question I have is, I'm actually just looking at the last image of the development, which is facing west, and I realise this is just a projection photographs, but there does look quite a lot of shadow, and I wonder just how dark those properties might be. So the windows, so you see a little red car, you see, looks like a chap walking past, and I'm just wondering how dark and how much natural daylight will actually come in through those properties there, and might that be bedrooms?
Certainly, we did take into account the likelihood of the proposed development, given the scale and the 6-storey height, causing a degree of overshadowing. And on that basis, I can show you we looked into that in terms of the property opposite, which is the property to the north, directly to the north. And here I'm not sure. Can you see that on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So it shows the sun. It's a sun shadow study, which shows the existing situation and the existing level of shadow that's cast on that property, and that takes you through from March through to October. So whilst there is no shadow at the moment at noon or 3 o'clock in June, and there's no shadow at the moment in October at 12 noon or in March at 12 noon. You can see on the right hand side of that image, which is the proposed shadow that would be cast as a result of the development. So it would cause an increase in shadow, particularly in March at 12 noon. Certainly there's no increase in June, midsummer, but again there's an increase in shadow in October. So yes, it's accepted that there is going to be some impact, given the scale of development. There is going to be some impact on overshadowing, but it was felt that the surrounding properties would still be afforded a reasonable amount of daylight and sunlight, and that the overshadowing was not significant in that respect.
Okay, Councillor Stewart, do you require any further?
Does that?
It answers the question, but I'm not. I'm just wondering what would be classified as significant sort of deprivation of daylight. Just looking at those pictures, to me that looks quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. The feeling was that on the basis that there would potentially be an increased impact over the winter months, that impact would perhaps have less, would be less critical than if, for example, the overshadowing was to be throughout the year, and particularly during the spring and summer months.
Okay, I'll leave it like that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Cormie.
Thank you, Convener. My questions were almost exactly the same as Councillor Stewart's there. I take it, Ms. Forbes, that these buildings across the road is that West Glendale Mews and Union Glen Court that the shadowing would be affecting?
No. The image that's showing here is for property to the north, which is 44 to 46 Union Glen. West Glendale Mews sits to the east.
So regarding shadowing on West Glendale Mews and Union Glen Court, there would be no natural sunlight affecting these properties, would there?
Again, it is considered that there would be some impact given the scale of development, but it was considered, and that was why we sought additional support and information in terms of the sun shadow study, that the most impact would be to the property to the north.
And it would okay, and okay. Give us an idea of the rough idea of the amount of flats that we're talking about in West Glendale Mews and Union Glen Court. How many properties would be affected?
Union Glen Court, I'm not certain. West Glendale Mews, which is immediately to the east, it's a four-story flatted development. I'm not certain whether there are potentially 3 flats on each floor, potentially 9 to 12 properties. What might be worth taking you back to look at is existing setup.
Yeah,
that. So certainly. In terms of that property, there will be some additional overshadowing, but if I take you back to the floor plan, there is still that separation distance on. This is the front of the. Can you see the site layout plan there?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is the front of West Glendale Mews. This is front elevation facing north onto the car park, and there is a separation distance between the property and West Glendale Mews, and these two blocks here are both at 5-storey as opposed to this, which is the 6-storey element. And that again was taken into account, and the separation distance was taken into account as a result of the potential impact. I don't know whether that...
Does that answer your question, Councillor Cormie?
Convener, is it okay if I just come in for a moment?
Certainly, Mr. Prentice.
It's just to clarify the question from Councillor Cormie. West Glendale Mews has got 12 properties in it. The flats directly opposite, there's 8 properties in that. Other one, I think you mentioned Union Glen Court has got 10 properties in it. In terms of West Glendale Mews, the shadow that would be cast by this building would be mostly over the car park to the front of that building and wouldn't directly affect the windows of any of the main sort of living rooms within any of those flats.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Prentice. Is that helpful, Councillor Cormie? You're on mute, Bill.
Sorry, I know that the car park helped me understand that. Convener, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else's hands. I've got a question. It's actually from Mr. Jones. I noticed on page 48 in the under education that there was a suggestion that would need developers' obligations for a reconfiguration car law. I just wondered if you could have given me any more detail on that.
Yes, no problem, Karina. First of all, just to say that because the flats are 2 beds and 1 bedroom flats, we're not expecting a significant number of pupils to be generated by this development. However, Harlow Academy is over capacity, so we would be looking for a contribution towards work we have planned to reconfigure spaces within the school just to create some additional capacity in that school.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, have Councillor Yvonne.
Convener, yeah. My hand is up.
Mine too, Convener.
Yeah, I can see you all. I've got Councillor Allen, then Councillor Gregg and Councillor Coote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a concern about this parking, and I would like to know more about the justification, because I understand that people are living in the city centre. People don't work in the city centre, and I'm pretty sure that at least half of these people will have a car. And there is already quite a parking problem there. So I would like if they could just justify a bit more on that. Do you want me to give me all your questions? I've got a couple.
Yeah, please, Councillor Allen, and that'll allow you.
Yeah, and on the reading of this, I do seem to see that some of the windows on this development would be looking in at blank walls. You'd look out your window and all you'd see, I think it's on the west side, I'm not sure now, I haven't written down exactly where. They're actually just looking at a wall through their window. It's right as being very good. I think that'll do just now. If I can have that too, I might come back if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Mrs. Forbes.
Okay, in relation to the car parking, certainly Roads Development Management team were consulted and raised no objection with the no car parking proposal on the basis that it's with the site lies within a controlled parking zone, and the mitigation measures in terms of the secure cycle parking, which would be within the property, within the development, and ease of access to local bus routes, including for pedestrians and cyclists as well, ease of access to the city centre, and the ease of moving from the property. It wasn't, the proposal was deemed with current supplementary guidance and policy in terms of supporting no car developments. There is a car club located on Hollybank Place. and there is spare capacity there. Therefore, in terms of supporting, again, a mitigatory measure in terms of supporting the car club provision and use for future residents, the proposed membership packs and a level of credit for future residents. And as I say, there is that spare capacity within the park provision, although that is relatively high. In relation to the windows and the outlook, I'll go back. All the units are dual aspect. That was one of the amendments which took place during consideration of the application, to ensure that there was sufficient daylight and sunlight for all properties. I'm not aware of any windows for habitable rooms that would look onto a blank wall. I'll just go back to the site layout plan. So here, this is the stair. Is that showing up on everyone's?
No, that's just got yours facing southward. That's, yeah, you're getting back to layout. Yeah, that's the site layout plan.
Okay, so here we've got front elevation facing north of the windows here. To the south, the dual aspect here. This block here, which again is dual aspect with to the north and south, and this block here, which again is dual aspect with windows facing south and west. There are windows to the stairwell here and to this stairwell here. Again, for this, although this is showing the ground floor layout, windows are again dual aspect and to the north and south. So there's certainly no outlook which will be directly onto a window from any habitable room on any floor level.
I think you mean a wall, do you, Mrs. Forbes? No.
Sorry.
You said there's no direct look into a window. Do you mean a wall?
I do.
Councillor Allen, can you hear Mrs. Forbes okay? Because I know that she's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I think I got the drift of what you were saying. Can I just have a follow-on question? Is there any condition about bus passes? I know in the past that we've done that to encourage people to actually use the buses. Has she got any idea of the route that people would take walking to the buses?
There is certainly the closest bus stop provision would be on Holborn Street, and that's a distance of 250 metres from the site, and that would take you up Justice Mill Bray onto Holborn Street relatively quickly. There is no indication in terms of bus pass provision, but here the focus is on the car club memberships.
And my last question, thank you, convener, was there any negotiation at all about the height of the building and why 6 stories and not 4 as might have been suggested previously?
The height quite closely reflects what was approved previously for the apart hotel. Although it was actually, there was a section of the apart hotel which rose to 7 stories, and the drop in to the east took into account the existing buildings surrounding the site. So it takes into account the fact that the tenement building to the west, which fronts onto Holborn Street, is 6 stories in height, and this drops down because of the roof design, drops down, and then beyond that, whilst there is acknowledging there's an additional story to the development on the eastern elevation compared to the property at West Glendale Mews. The drop in ground levels was deemed to be appropriate and closely reflects the height of the building, as I say, that was previously consented.
Councillor
Okay, that's me done, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Gregg and then Councillor Coote.
Thank you, convener. I've got a series of questions, so if it's okay, I'll just go through them one by one
Yeah, that's fine.
That's great, thank you. First of all, I'd like to go back to the education subject. There is I believe, a formula for calculating the anticipated number of additional pupils. It's not mentioned in the submission from the education consultation or in the report. So how many additional pupils are expected for Ferryhill Primary School and for Harlaw Academy? What's the actual statistic?
Okay, do we have, gosh, I've lost you. Are you still there? Okay. Oh, Mr. Jones, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, the number of pupils expected from this development is quite low. We calculate the number of pupils to be generated by, first of all, calculating the equivalent, the standard house unit equivalent. So we basically work out if these were 3-bedroom properties, how many would there be? And that works out actually at 12 properties. And from that, we can then calculate the number of pupils to be generated for each school based on the pupil per household rate that we use for the school roll forecasting. So that's basically multiplying the pupil per household rate by 12 standard house unit equivalents. So for Ferryhill School, we would expect the equivalent of 1.2 pupils to be generated by the development, and at Harlow Academy, just under 1 pupil, in fact. But because of rounding, we would calculate the developer contributions based on 1 pupil.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. The second question, if I could move on. In many of our planning applications, there is an evaluation from a crime prevention perspective. There doesn't seem to be that analysis in this one. Could I ask why not?
Okay, Mrs. Forbes.
Sorry, from a crime prevention
crime prevention
perspective.
Yes.
Designing out crime, I think it's called now.
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not. I don't think that there was any consideration that this would likely have any impact on crime in the. Are you referring to the potential for crime in relation to the development and the design of the layout and how that addresses the potential for crime?
Yes, there have been applications which have been assessed, the plans, the layout, so forth, have been assessed by crime prevention specialists, architectural liaison officers,
okay,
from the police, but it hasn't happened in this case.
No, the rear courtyard, access to the property itself, the building itself, would be off the 2 courtyards directly off Union Glen, and obviously that would be controlled potentially by pass, by fob, whatever method the developer decides is appropriate. There are access gates which provide access to the rear courtyard, but those gates again are secure. Therefore, the rear courtyard, which, because of the nature of the site and the extensive change in ground level, there is not the potential for any access, or highly unlikely for any access from the south of the site, from the Willowbank retail car park. And the only other access to that courtyard area and the private amenity space would be via the secure gates that would be along, as I say, from access from Union Glen.
Okay, thank you for that. I would just add that that the crime prevention evaluations have given us some comfort, but thank you for that. Thank you for that response. The next question is about the disabled spaces. 2 disabled spaces, are these for residents or for visitors?
These would be allocated for residents. As far as I'm aware, I don't know whether
right.
Roads Development Management Team can advise further on that, but certainly it's on the basis of the requirement for residents.
Okay, thank you. It's just that the development was described as car free, but obviously it's not in that case. And then the final question, page 57 gives information on the results of the noise impact assessment, and there's mention there of a closed window strategy and the recommendation of use of ventilators to mitigate noise impacts. So could we just have a little more detail on that? I mean, does that mean that the windows are locked? You can't open the windows? What's the story there?
Because of the potential noise nuisance from traffic along Holborn Street, there was a noise impact assessment which established that mechanical ventilation would be required within the properties which front onto Union Glen and are obviously closest to Holborn Street. And therefore the closed window strategy allows for those properties to be occupied and habitable with windows closed because of the mechanical ventilation. But obviously there would not be a requirement for that. Future residents could open the windows, but it allows them to have the windows closed and have suitable level of ventilation within the properties.
Thank you for that. Just one final supplementary based on that, if I may. Is that closed windows strategy deployed regularly, or is it just for affordable housing properties?
No, I think in a city centre location such as this, where noise is certainly a potential issue, and certainly where it's been identified here, where there's a traffic noise from Holborn Street, it is a strategy that we would look at and take into account in order to ensure delivering a suitable level of residential amenity.
Many thanks. I appreciate that. All done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, it's just a quickie on the disabled car parking spaces. Will they have EV charging points?
That's not something which has been provided as part of the proposal, but so I'm not certain whether it's something that can be considered at this stage. I'm not sure whether Roads Development Management can maybe advise further on that, but it certainly, there would potentially be the space for that to be accommodated within the car park layout that's been provided and for those two spaces.
Okay, Mr. Cowie, I see you on the call. Could you comment?
Yes, yeah, there hasn't been any provision for electric vehicles, because usually that would be if it was for more form of general car parking, that you would have the well, maybe one unit and then the infrastructure below the surface, so you could introduce further charging points at a future date if there was more demand. But in this circumstance, for the volume of only 2 spaces, that hasn't been sought.
Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's a bit sort of short-sighted, really, given that we're phasing out petrol and diesel cars in the not too distant future. That's just yeah.
I think the layout would allow for that to be accommodated in the future. Certainly, there would be sufficient space for that facility to be accommodated within the layout that's shown.
Convener, can I come back in again, please?
Yeah,
it's just to say that if members are minded to grant permission for this development, and if they feel that electric charging points are an important item, they could actually ask for an additional condition to be added to the consent to secure the delivery of the charging points.
I think that would be helpful. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Thanks, and that was it. That was my only question.
Okay, Councillor Allen, I'm assuming that's a historic hand that's still up. Councillor Copeland.
If you would allow, I have one other question, if you would allow.
Yes, certainly. And Councillor Copeland, is that a historic hand or is that a new hand?
It's a new one. It's a very quick one.
Okay, I'll take Councillor Allen and then yourself. Councillor Allen.
Okay, can I just ask about the maintenance of the courtyard? How is that going to take place?
Mrs. Forbes.
There is a condition applied which, in terms of landscaping, which would require a maintenance plan, management plan for the landscaping. going forward, and that would be through the developer to submit that information for us. As I say, there is a condition that's been applied, which we would seek that detail.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Convener. Just a very quick one on this disabled parking spaces. We know that they're not allocated to individual properties and for use by anybody with a blue badge. Is this a controlled access or is it open?
Yes.
There is currently a gate with a pass which allows access from for occupants of and residents of the property that fronts onto Holborn Street, and as well as this site, it's a shared area in terms of the access. So the access comes through the pend. The gate that provides access is secure at the moment, and that would obviously the access to that would be shared with residents from the property.
Yes.
Okay, so am I right in thinking that somebody who lives nearby with a blue badge could actually go in and park there?
No, I don't think so. I think Mrs. Forbes said it was a secured pass only access. Is that correct, Mrs. Forbes?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think that's all. Councillor Cook, is that a legacy hand or is it a new one?
Sorry, it's a legacy hand. I thought I'd taken it down. Sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions. Okay, you will see the recommendations which are on page 61, which is a willingness to approve subject to conditions and subject to the conclusion of a legal agreement securing payment of developers' obligations and ensuring that the development delivers a minimum of 25% as affordable housing. Now there's 11 conditions with an extra one that we've just discussed regarding electric charging points. They're laid out on pages 62 to 65. And then on page 66 to 68, we have the advisory notes. Is anybody otherwise minded?
Yes.
Councillor Gregg, okay.
Yeah.
Is that you would like to refuse the application, is that correct?
Yes, I would move refusal.
Okay, have you got a seconder? Is there anyone seconding Councillor Gregg?
Yes, I will.
Councillor Allen. Okay, well, obviously the procedure is that we then go into, or you go into a meeting with legal. So if I could ask, I saw that Mr. Thompson and Karen was also on the call. Could you make that arrangements to go into the, and the rest of us will go on hold for, we'll say 10 minutes because 5 minutes is never quite enough. Mr. Thompson, can you take charge of that element, please?
Yes, certainly, Convener.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Convener, I'll just read this out for the recording. So please note that Councillor Gregg has moved an amendment, and in order to review the appropriate wording with officers for his amendment, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period. Please note that the recording will continue. Therefore, this is a reminder to all participants to please switch off your microphones and camera during this adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you. They're still in the meeting, folks, so we'll just keep holding fire for a few more minutes. Lindsay, Ms. McBain, could you just check to see how they're getting on, please?
Okay, hold on one moment. Thank you.
We're done. We're done, Mary.
Oh, you're
We're
done.
back.
You're back. Okay, thanks.
We're back.
Perfect, excellent. Okay, Councillor Gregg, could you perhaps give us an indication of what your refusal that you'll be moving so that we can give members an understanding?
Yeah, thank you, convener. The grounds for refusal are varied. There are concerns about overdevelopment, adverse residential impacts. So this is to do with residential amenity. There is excessive massing and overbearing impact on the existing environment. There are also concerns about the development itself, that the quality of the development is not of a sufficiently robust level. concerns also about the design, the massing, the scale, the results of the noise impact assessment on the residential amenity of those of the future residents of that building. There are mitigating steps that have to be taken to deal with noise within those buildings. There's loss of light to existing residents, and there is insufficient open space. The open space policy, there's quite a considerable shortfall in providing space that would be commensurate with this kind of development. So those are that's a general outline.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Obviously, the recommendation on the report, as I outlined, was a willingness to approve. Is anybody, before we go any further, minded to support that recommendation? And I just have I'm not seeing any hands. Oh.
My hand's up. Convener.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cook. I think we've got a delayed hand mechanism. So you'll be prepared to, would you like to, at the moment, I'm interested to hear more from Councillor Gregg, obviously. You know, I've got a slight dilemma at the moment. I haven't completely made my mind up. So if Councillor Cook, if you'd like to move this, that would be fine. Would there be a seconder for Councillor Cook?
Yes, I'll second them.
And Councillor Copeland. Okay, that's fine. Okay, well, if we move, if you would like to, obviously the motion is the recommendation. So Councillor Cook, would you like to speak first, please?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll be brief. Essentially, I would support this for the reasons set out in the report, subject to the addition of the additional condition requiring electric vehicle charging points for the 2 disabled car park spaces. I think it's, I mean, I know that road reasonably well. I think it is, it would make a welcome additional contribution to much needed affordable housing in the city centre. And therefore, while I've got some sympathy with many of the reservations and questions that have been raised, I actually think on balance, the officer's recommendation is the correct approach in my view. So yeah, I won't sort of go on at great length about this. Simply say, I think we should go with the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Copeland?
Yes, thank you, Convener. I haven't got a lot to say that I agree with Councillor Cook. I think the officers have carefully studied this and went through it in detail, and I would fully support the recommendation. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. The reasons for moving refusal are very much based on the background of the applicable policies that we have for the city centre. As a council and many communities have wanted to see the city centre become more residential, change its character. We want to see something transformational, and that's why we've agreed various planning policies to do that. So I'm referring to policies VC1 and VC5, where we promote new city centre housing in order to make the city centre more vibrant. But any new housing needs to be quality. It needs to meet a certain standard in order to make the city centre a more attractive and a more desirable environment to live in. We also have the NC1 policy on city centre development. We have a city centre master plan, which promotes the right amount of development, the right quality of development, and the right type of housing within the city centre in order to increase the resident population in the city centre we need to be able to provide good quality, desirable housing. And I'm concerned that what we have is something that is not meeting those standards which we should have, and which residents and prospective residents deserve to see. We want to see under policy H2 mixed use developments within the city centre. They've got to. This development needs to integrate harmoniously and to add some character into the streetscape. And I'm afraid there are various reasons which are highlighted in the report which do not lead to the conclusion that it's acceptable or desirable. And indeed, many of the judgments made within the report are quite finely balanced. So there are not compelling reasons, many reasons which are not compelling in support of this application. So if we look at the policy on residential amenity, we're looking at windows which are facing onto walls, screened windows. The report acknowledges that this development will have considerable visual impact. It's the massing and the scale is considerable, and it is a constrained environment. And whilst there are other fairly similar properties in that environment, this doesn't integrate well with them. Sunlight will be lost to some properties. There will be more shadow on neighbouring properties, even if it's only in winter. That's half the year in which neighbouring residents will be adversely affected, and I just don't think that that's fair, and I don't think that that's inevitable, even in a city centre development. With some further careful consideration, I'm sure that it would be possible to produce a much more acceptable proposal for this site. The report confirms at page 54 that amenity is affected, but it says that on balance the judgment is that this is acceptable. So there is that ambiguity within the report. Again, it's not really a strong, it's not really a very strong reason for us to proceed. The page 55 mentions that the front north elevation is imposing, and once again it says that this isn't, that there is justification in objecting to this, but on balance it's considered acceptable. So clearly there's that acknowledgement that this 6-storey building is excessive and is dominant along Union Glen and is an example of overdevelopment. Moving on to the noise impact assessment on page 57. It's a city centre location. The traffic on Holborn Street is acknowledged as the main source of noise pollution affecting this proposal. I mean, noise, you accept that if you live in the city centre you will experience noise, but this property is quite high, and it's not, by the nature of this proposal, it's not doing anything to reduce the impact of noise, which if it was a lower level, a smaller development, that noise impact from Holborn Street would not be so high, and you wouldn't have to have the closed window strategy and the building of ventilator units. We want and we need more affordable housing. So 100% affordable housing is welcome in principle, but it needs to be good quality, well designed housing that we are providing in the city centre. The final point is on the policies on open space and the need for a strong landscape framework. Well, it's city centre. It's good that there is that small space around the back, but the report once again acknowledges that there is a shortfall in meeting the open space recommendations. So it's a small garden. I think that if the proposal had been designed differently, we might have had larger garden space, more sense of openness, rather than that quite oppressive and dominant block. So those are the reasons why I'm moving refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I would underline all that Councillor Gregg has said, but I would like to enforce as well. The light, perhaps it's winter it's going to affect, but we have to remember that winter is our darkest light time anyway. It's going to exacerbate that. And I think that this housing, it needs to, I would say, enhance the area, not just be acceptable. And it's not going to enhance that area. It's going to be overdevelopment as far as I can see, but I would certainly underline all that Councillor Gregg has said. Thank you.
Okay. Members that would like to come into debate. I'll just give it a minute for any hands that want to come up. Councillor Cormie.
Yeah, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendations, convener. I mean, I have looked at this. This is a type of, you know, we need to get young folk into the city centre. I'm a great supporter of that. And to ask, you know, I could, well, kind of see where Councillor Gregg and Councillor Allen are coming from. But what you know, a lot to do with the master plan as well. Young folk cannot afford these really expensive developments that Councillor Gregg's suggesting. I mean, I live just outside the city centre and I've got flats all round about me. And at different times of the day, the sun goes and you move about your flat. You know, you're never going to get it perfect. We need folk in the city centre for the city centre to function properly. I remember in 2015 when that hotel was granted permission, and that was far bigger than this development was going to be. All in all, you know, you live in the city centre, the buses are there. I was concerned about the shadowing to a certain degree, but to get a property to live in the city centre without any shadowing at all coming into your property is very far and few between. We're very fortunate to have local amenities with parks around about us. I mean, you've got the Duthie Park down there, you've got that one in Bonnecourt Terrace. You've got several local amenities, green spaces that are quite close to walk or cycle or get the bus to there. All in all, the benefits far outweigh the negatives here. And I'll be supporting this affordable, 100% affordable housing. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cormie. Does anybody else? I'm not seeing any other hands currently. No. If I could contribute, because obviously it's quite unusual that I don't move one thing or the other. But it has been quite a difficult application in terms of determining it, because again, what we want to make sure is that the amenity is right for the existing residents as well as potentially the new residents. Now, again, the developer has said that he wants to make it 100% affordable. However, we can't compel him to make it 100% affordable. And as you'll have seen by the recommendation, it's a minimum of 25% is what we can compel him to deliver. I would agree with Councillor Cormie. You know, I had just done a quick recce of the sort of open space around that area in terms of amenity space for new residents as well as the existing. And that includes things like the tennis courts, etc., down at Ferry Hill. And I think COVID has sharpened our minds, all of our minds, to the importance of amenity space, but also the importance of the home. And I was slightly concerned about the suggestion that people won't be able to open their window, but that was addressed, and that they do have the choice. And again, we have to be realistic. If you're living in the city centre, you know, you're living in a noisy area in comparison to maybe out in the rural hinterlands. Again, I've looked. I haven't got as big an aversion to some of the design of it. You know, it is perhaps, I was just trying to understand the scale. I mean, I looked at a lot of the submissions or objections and points that were raised. Many of them were around the car parking, which, you know, we are going to come to this difficult position as a council or as a planning authority as well, where, you know, as we push our greener agenda to try and, if you like, save the planet, that we do need to try and reduce our usage. However, at the same time, we're obviously advocating electric vehicles and other, you know, types of cars that will be powered on an alternative fuel source. You know, so it's been quite a difficult application to consider. However, we always have to, regardless of whether it's affordable housing or mainstream housing, for me, we must make sure that the amenity provided and the type of housing being provided is of a good quality. Now, you know, D1 design and quality placemaking, you know, sometimes that can be, you know, there is obviously certain standards that have to be met, and which I'm assured have been met on this. You know, sometimes design is obviously in the eye of the beholder. We've obviously got H1, which is about the character now of that particular area. Now, because of all the different styles, some older buildings such as the tenements, then we've got some of the newer flats, you know, it's quite difficult to say it has a particular style. And like Councillor Cormier, I was around when we decided on the last application, which was very big, and it was an apart hotel. However, you know, I think on balance, and you know, and even as I'm saying it, I'm still trying to work it through my mind. I will. I think I will. I'll make a decision when we go to the vote. I think, because as I say, it is finely balanced. But I think what we've got to do is understand what we're trying to achieve in city centre living. And as I say, at the moment, you know, please don't be kind of, and I think Councillor Stewart raised this in some of her questioning, please don't be just swayed because of the 100% affordable, because as I've said, we can't compel them, but there will be a minimum of 25% affordable. So I think probably that's all I've got to say on it. Does anybody else want to say anything before we go to summing up?
Convener, my hand's up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a difficult application, and it's funny. I find applications you think might be just quite straightforward, and then when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, it can become more complex and detailed, and you can be swayed. My concerns are the same as I outlined in my questioning at the beginning, and I was, of course, the first to jump in there because it really sort of stuck out to me. And the main thing I see is the overshadowing. I know what it's like in the past. I've lived in a house that is or a property that is completely overshadowed for a large part of the year. It's really depressing. And what concerns me is, yes, I know we need to have more properties in the city, but just because we have that, is that a reason to make such a compromise on someone's quality of life? And I think natural daylight coming into a property is a huge thing that I think the vast majority of people would want. I mean, January is a very depressing month as it is. It's so dark from almost the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed, and I do not think that is a good way to live. And furthermore, just because it might be affordable housing, I don't think just because it's affordable housing we should make that compromise on people's quality of living. I think that's quite a high price to pay. So what I'm saying is everybody should be afforded the best outlook, and just because their budget isn't the same as others doesn't mean they shouldn't have a good quality of home to live in. That for me is quite a big concern. It is easy to say, or you can go out to parks and so on. And yes, I'm sure people can go out to parks, but from that locality, you would have quite a distance to go if you were to walk down to Duthie Park to find some greenery and a place to sit. So for those reasons, convener, I do have a rather large question mark in my mind as to what way I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Does anybody else want to contribute to debate? I'm not seeing any other hands apart from Councillor Stewart. Can you take your hand down, Jennifer, for me? Thanks. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. Okay, we'll go to summing up. So if we're in reverse order, Councillor Gregg, if you'd like to sum up.
Yes, yeah, thank you, convener. First of all, like you, convener, I'm looking at this proposal in context. So I'm trying to get an overall view of how this proposal relates to those planning policies, in particular in relation to the city centre. So how can this contribute towards building a more desirable, a more attractive residential population within the city centre? It has to be a suitable development that complies with those policies about making it a more vibrant city centre that's commercial and residential, and how they relate together. So those have really been guiding me in trying to appreciate and assess this proposal. Councillor Cormie, I agree with Councillor Cormie that we should be getting more young people into the city centre. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. But where I have trouble is that comment that what I was proposing was not affordable to them. I'm puzzled, because to me affordable doesn't mean low quality or no quality. I think that you can, but you must build affordable housing that meets high standards of living, and I'm afraid, well, it's not just the affordable policy that I'm focusing on. It's actually the quality of the build, in the interests of the new residents who will go in there. Are they going into an attractive, desirable property? Well, from what I said in my opening remarks, no. The building has not been designed in such a way as to mitigate sufficiently the noise impacts, and you can do it. The scale of the building, the massing of the building is quite considerable, and I think that the future residents would deserve a better quality of build, and in relation to those future residents, I think that they would also, that there is space there for a more open area, which would make it a more desirable development, but that's not being proposed. Just to close, also the impact on the existing properties is unacceptable. I'm convinced that there could be a well-designed different proposal on this site, which would not remove daylight and which would not have an adverse impact on the existing residents and on the neighbouring environment. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Gregg has said, particularly in terms of saying that affordable housing should not be low quality housing. But actually, looking at the illustrations in the pack, it actually, to my mind, doesn't look like a low quality build. It looks perfectly acceptable, particularly in the context of the area. It looks quite similar to some of the existing more modern developments there. In terms of the enhancing the area, I do get the point about an issue of overshadowing, but actually I would have thought that folk in the existing properties to the north side of Union Glen there would probably prefer to live opposite some more flats rather than an industrial unit. And then in terms of the open space issue, Councillor Stewart's right to say that Duthie Park is a bit of a schlep. It is. It's walkable, but it's a long walk. But at the eastern end of Union Glen, you've got that pretty large grassed area that borders Hardgate, or behind Hardgate and Bonaccord Crescent, and that's only about 3 minutes walk. So I would have thought that you've actually got a nice grassed area much closer to you there than a lot of properties in the city. So on balance, I don't think it's a slam dunk, but on balance, as I say, I support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Councillor Stewart, could you just pop your hand down? It's still showing, and I've tried taking it down, but I can't seem to manage it.
Sorry, Camilla, but it looks at my end, it looks like it's down.
It's down now, thanks. I don't know what was.
I think there must be a delay because I did it straight away, but hey ho, that's technology for you.
I know. I just didn't want, in case there was something that you needed to raise, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, right, Mrs. McBain, we've obviously heard from the motion and the amendment. Could I get you to take us to the vote, please?
Okay, thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of Councillor Cook to approve the application conditionally as per the committee report, with the extra condition in regards to the electric vehicle charging points, and an amendment in the name of Councillor Gregg to refuse the application. Could members please vote motion on amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Amendment.
Councillor Allen?
Amendment.
Councillor Cook?
Motion.
Councillor Copeland?
Motion.
Councillor Cormie?
Motion.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Amendment.
Councillor Malik?
Motion.
The motion has 5 votes and the amendment has 4 votes, therefore the application is approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, folks, and thank you. That was a very well debated item, which I know that gave people quite a lot of difficult decisions right up until the point that they were actually casting their votes. But we have 11 conditions on page 62 to 65, plus the additional one on the electric charging points and the advisory notes on page 66 to 68. Okay, thanks, folks, and thanks, Mrs. Forbes and Mr. Prentice. Moving on to item 6.2, approvals of matters specified in conditions. Approval of matters specified in conditions 1, access, siting design, landscaping, 10, sub pond, 14 waste management for planning permission in principle for reference P110790, the erection of a cafe class 3 with outdoor seating area at the Stonywood Estate, Aberdeen. That's planning reference 200196. That's on pages 69 to 90. Mrs. Green.
Thank you. Yes, this is the matter specified in condition application relating to conditions on what was the original outline application at Stonywood, and it's for a cafe with an external seating area. So that you should be seeing the site plan now, just showing the application site, which lies between the unit which contains co-op and offices to the north, and to the south is the Marks and Spencer's. Then to the east, the flats and houses on Beach, and to the west is Stonywood Road. So this slide shows the wider area and how the site sits in the context of Stonywood. It's just outlined in red there. Google image showing the square as existing, and the site's this area in the middle. That's a street view image from Beach Manor, looking west towards Stonywood Road. So the site is in the middle of this area here. And this is the layout plan showing the cafe and external seating area. So it's just here. 3 of the existing trees would need to be removed from that area, and some of the benches, 2 of the benches would be moved and relocated just to the north of the unit. This is the layout again, just showing the internal layout. So the area to the rear, which is nearest to Beach Manor, would be for the ancillary facilities. These are the elevations showing glazing on 3 sides, and then to the rear facing Beach Manor, timber cladding. And this is a contextual drawing showing the relationships with the surrounding commercial buildings and the housing. Street view, just looking east from the car park towards the flats and houses on Beach Manor. And that's again looking north up Beach Manor with the site on the left here. Looking from Stonywood Road across to the site. Okay. So in terms of consultations on the applications, the roads team commented and were content with parking survey that was carried out, and it showed that about 50% of the existing car park was occupied most of the time. So there were plenty of spaces there. They were content with the swept path analysis showing sufficient space for deliveries to take place within the car park, and recommended a condition on waiting restrictions on Beach Manor. Dice and Stonywood Community Council commented they objected to the loss of open space and raised the concerns of local residents relating to the impact on amenities. There were 4 objections to the application. To summarise, the main areas of objection were amenity in terms of the views of residents and disturbance from traffic and parking on Beach Manor and deliveries. So turning to the evaluation of the application, the development framework, which is just shown on this slide, the area where the cafe is proposed is just here. So the development framework includes a cafe amongst the list of mix of uses that it seeks within that area. It says that a cafe may be considered complementary to residential use, providing it's acceptable in terms of noise and traffic. Overall, it was considered that the public space would remain, as well as external seating for the cafe users. I'll just go back to the layout slide. So it was considered that the cafe would animate the public space, and that in terms of parking, there was sufficient space for customers and for delivery. And with the condition relating to waiting restrictions, the proposal would be acceptable in terms of the development framework and policy H1. Surface water drainage would remain as existing, and refuse storage would be from the rear, which was also acceptable. So overall, the recommendation was for approval with the conditions mentioned on page 89 of the agenda.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Green. Questions, members? Not seeing any hands at the moment. Am I missing anybody? Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused by this because M&S Food had a cafe which was busy and it's closed down. So I don't understand why an outside cafe, look at day to day, would you like to go to it? And I mean, parking can be an issue between the Co-op and M&S Food anyway, at lunchtimes. And at the end of the day, sort of 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So,
can I maybe ask the roads, because they've obviously said that they had looked at the parking amount of parking spaces. Could you perhaps give an indication to Councillor Mackenzie when this was done, given the timeline that she's indicated that there seems to be heavy use of the car parking?
Yes, thank you, convener. It was actually a member of my team who did it, but I have the survey in front of me, and the survey seems to have been carried out on a Saturday between 7 AM and 7 PM at 15-minute intervals, and Saturday would obviously be the day you would anticipate to be the most heavily trafficked, and obviously 12 hours is quite a comprehensive survey, more than we would normally ask for, and within that 12-hour period it was at most shown to be 50% of capacity, so yeah, we had no issues with that.
Can you maybe, excuse me, tell us when it was carried out? Because obviously we've been under COVID restrictions, etc. So it's about understanding how that might have impacted on the parking. Do you know?
Yeah, it seems to have been carried out on the 3rd of October, which obviously is during 2020, sorry, which is obviously during when COVID was on the go. I'm not sure what specific lockdown restrictions were happening at that moment, if people were told not to go out, but I'm sure at all points people were still allowed to go shopping. Whether or not less people were just due to fear of COVID, it's hard to establish, but obviously 50% is at the worst time. That's not throughout the whole day, that's just at the worst. So there's still quite a large margin of free parking. So I would assume that 6 spaces being required for this cafe is very acceptable from a roads perspective.
Okay, Councillor Mackenzie.
well, I shouldn't admit it, but I'm there every other day. I'm still not convinced.
In terms of the cafe, I don't know if we can really give you an answer, Mrs. Green. Do you have any answer around the closure of the M&S cafe facility, or it might be due to COVID? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, on site visits during the summer, it was closed, I think, due to COVID. But I mean, we need to consider what's in front of us rather than competition.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Is there any other questions? I'm not seeing.
Yeah, I've got my hand up, Karina.
Okay, Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thank you. I like Councillor Mackenzie. I use this shop as well. I can confirm, because I spoke to manager at Marks and Spencer's just the other week there. They did close their cafe due to COVID restrictions. That's what he told me anyway. I've been there on numerous occasions at various times of the day, both pre-COVID and since. I must say I've never had a problem getting a parking space. To my mind, there's plenty of parking on site. I do believe that putting yellow lines in Beach Manor is a very good idea, because the entrances to this shop, if you go, one of the pages has got the Google Earth view, the marquees at the bottom and the co-op at the top, Beach Manor on the right. The access to this is off Beach Manor at the other side of Marquees at one side, and the other side of the co-op at the other side takes you up and takes you in. That's the two entrances to this complex. There's parking, as you can see, between the co-op and Stonywood Road. There's also parking between Marquees and Stonywood Road, and there's further parking at the other side of Max and Spencer's as well. So there's always been plenty of spaces any time I've been there, and I've even popped in there at lunchtime. And there is, Councillor McKenzie's right, there is a sandwich trade, let's say, that arrive at Marquees to get their sandwiches, but people are tend to be in and out. So I really didn't see a problem with the parking here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Copeland. Is there any other questions? No. Okay, folks, if there's no other questions, the recommendation is one of approval subject to conditions. The conditions are laid out on page 89 to 90. There's 5, and there's also an advisory note on page 90. Is anybody otherwise minded? No. Okay, so again, just for completeness, I'll just ask Ms McBain to go through a roll call for the vote so that we've got it for the record. Thank you, Mrs McBain.
Thank you, convener. So if everybody can just indicate that they're happy to approve the application as per the recommendation. So convener.
Approve.
Vice convener.
Approve.
Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Approve.
Happy to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Approve.
Councillor Cormie.
Approve.
Councillor Gregg.
Approve.
Councillor McKenzie.
Approve.
Councillor Malik.
Approve.
Okay, so that's the application approved as per the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're moving on to other reports. At 7.1, we've got the draft city centre conservation area character appraisal. It's on page 91 to 204, and we have Ross is here to give us a little presentation on it. It's a really good piece of work. I think it will be well received. I've already had correspondence from some people on it, very keen to see that we are updating it. So I'll say no more and hand over to Ross.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so I'm just going to give a brief bit of context for the revised appraisal document and then a summary of the proposed changes to the document, the proposed boundary changes, the proposed Regulation 11 direction, and the proposed public consultation. Firstly, what is a conservation area? A conservation area is defined in legislation as being an area of special architectural or historic interest, the character or appearance of which is desirable to preserve or enhance. So conservation area character appraisals define and evaluate key attributes such as buildings, streets, views, open spaces that contribute towards the area's special architectural and historic interest. As such, they provide supporting background information for development management case officers, planning consultants, developers, agents, owners of historic buildings within conservation areas, as well as members of the public with a general interest. Conservation area character appraisals are useful tools in assessing the impact of development on the character of a conservation area. If approved, the city centre conservation area character appraisal would be Aberdeen planning guidance. It would be non-statutory, it would be a non-statutory piece of guidance, but it would be a material consideration for planning and listed building consent applications within the city centre. And so yeah, so just a bit of context about the city centre conservation area. So it was originally the Union Street Conservation Area, and it was designated on the 1st of July 1968. It was subsequently extended in 1980, 1985, 1987, 1996 and 2007. The first conservation area appraisal was written in 2007, and although still a sound document, is required to be updated to take into account changes in policy, the socio-economic context, as well as recent relevant developments within the city centre. The council also has a requirement to update this document in line with grant conditions for the Union Street Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme. And yeah, this slide just kind of shows the change from kind of Union Street and the kind of the expansion to kind of what we're proposing, kind of. And so the main changes, a comprehensive review of the conservation area and the previous appraisal that was written in 2007 has taken place as part of the preparation of this document. The main changes proposed are the name of the conservation area is proposed to be changed from Union Street Conservation Area to City Centre Conservation Area. The structure of the updated appraisal document has changed from the previous appraisal. The number of character areas has been reduced from 11 to 3, given more clearly defined boundaries. This allows for more detailed analysis of the new character areas and makes the document more useful for assessing development within the city centre. The policy context has also been updated to include the city centre master plan. 5 boundary changes are proposed as part of the review of the city centre conservation area. Further details can be seen in Appendix 2, but I am just going to run through them quickly just to give you a kind of summary overview. There are 3 smaller boundary changes and 2 larger boundary changes. Photos of the buildings proposed for inclusion in the conservation area can be seen in Appendix 2. So the first proposed boundary change is 8 to 14 Chapel Street. 8 Chapel Street is an excellent example of a relatively unaltered street-facing facade. The curved corner of the granite tenement building contributes substantially to the character of Chapel Street. 10 to 14 Chapel Street are also good quality granite buildings that would also contribute to the special character of the conservation area. Next one is 15 to 17 Gallowgate, which is a good example of a 19th century granite tenement building that contributes to the historic character of the Gallowgate. And 12 to 14 and 22 to 24 Virginia Street are located to the east of Marshall Street Bridge. 12 to 14 Virginia Street is C-listed and 22 to 24 Virginia Street is unlisted. There are very few examples of historic warehouse buildings left in Aberdeen and even fewer in the harbour area. These buildings are an important part of the history of the harbour and the wider city. They also contribute to the historic streetscape. And onto the 2 slightly larger boundary changes. So Holborn Street and Union Grove, the proposed extension would include 41 to 43 Holborn Street, which is the Foundry pub, 28 to 38 Holborn Street, and 4 to 14 Union Grove, which is Skene House, which is B listed, and 16 to 18 Union Grove. 41 to 43 Holborn Street is a good example of a 1920s granite building, and the primary elevations are relatively unaltered. 16 to 18 Union Grove dates from around 1915 and is somewhat of an unusual building type, especially for this area of the city. The building consists of 2 1.5-storey and 2 bay cottages with pedimented dormers. Both these buildings are currently unlisted but do contribute to the historic character of the streetscape, so would benefit from inclusion in the conservation area and the protection that that would afford them. The final boundary change is for the area that is bound by Upper Kirkgate, Broad Street, Nether Kirkgate and St Nicholas Street. The new Marshall Square development and St Nicholas Centre occupy the majority of this area. The area also includes 14 to 28 Nether Kirkgate, which is a good example of a 19th century granite tenement building. Flower Mill Lane, which is one of the few remaining medieval streets in the city centre, and the A-listed Provoskeens House. This area is surrounded by the current conservation area boundary on all sides, and it's somewhat of an anomaly which has evolved as a result of later changes to the original conservation area boundary. Including this area within the boundary of the conservation area would improve its continuity and allow for clearer, more consistent decision making for future development. And so onto the proposed Regulation 11. A Regulation 11 direction allows local authorities to remove deemed consent for certain classes of advertisement. It does not prevent this type of advertisement, it just means that advertisement consent would need to be granted in order for it to be displayed. As part of the City Centre Conservation Area Appraisal Review, it is proposed to make an application for a Regulation 11 direction representation to Scottish Government to remove deemed consent for large to let or for sale signs in the City Centre Conservation Area. Full details can be seen in Appendix 3. There's been a substantial proliferation of large projecting to let signs in the city centre over recent years. These can be unsightly and detract from the special character of the building they are attached to and the wider streetscape. The intention of the Regulation 11 direction is to give greater control over the size and proportion of to let and for sale signs within the city centre. The proposed Regulation 11 direction would give the local authority more control over the type of for sale or to let sign that would be erected within the city centre area. At times, these can be unsightly and detract from the amenity and special character of the conservation area. Increased control would mean this impact could be minimised. On to the final slide. The draft City Centre Conservation Area Character Appraisal would be made available for 6 weeks. The consultation would include publication of all relevant documents on the Aberdeen City Council Consultation Hub, issue of a press release on the Council's website advertising the consultation period and giving details on how to comment on the draft documents and proposals. A press advert would be placed in the P&J newspaper to advertise the consultation period. Notification of the consultation will also be issued to statutory consultees and all community councils across the city. All community councils that fall within the boundary of the conservation area and proposed boundary amendments will be offered a meeting to discuss the proposed document. Where possible, presentations will be given to the community council via Microsoft Teams or similar. And Aberdeen Inspired and the Disability Equity Partnership will also be consulted. Presentations will be given via Microsoft Teams or similar. And that's me.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mr. Wilson. As I say, I know the amount of work that's gone into it, and even fine-tuning something that exists. You still have to go through the whole thing to make sure it still has the right thread running through it. So, thank you very much for all the work that you've done on this. Members, questions for Mr. Wilson? Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Kimmy. I've got 2 or 3 actually. Okay. Is there a statutory period of time when we have to review this? I mean, like, we review it now, do we do it again in a year's time, or is it like 5 years or 10 years?
There is no time period. So the legislation says that you need to review from time to time, but there's no actually any statutory kind of time period. We are trying to we're going to try and work to a 5-year review period. So we've kind of, this is the last one, so all the other ones have been done reasonably recently, and the intention is kind of to try and review all the conservation area appraisals across the city, and within 5 years, like after 5 years of them kind of being done for the last time, if that makes sense. So yeah, so there isn't a statutory time period, but we're trying to work to 5 years.
Thank you. I'm maybe going to stray here somewhere I shouldn't go, but given the given the recent ruling regarding our multi-stories, is that going to affect our boundaries of the conservation area?
No, we've kind of referenced in the document in I think it's section 2.215 that references that they were kind of, when we wrote the document, that it was being reviewed by HES and that they were being proposed for listing. They're listed in their own right, so they're afforded their own protection through the listed building status. So there's not a reason to include them within the conservation area. The A-listed status would offer them the kind of any kind of protection. But yes, we're not proposing to include any of them in the conservation area.
Thank you for that. Can I just say it's an excellent report, very easy reading. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. Has anybody got any other questions? No, I'm not seeing any hands. Shout if I'm missing it. Nope. Okay. Councillor Cook. Councillor Cook.
Excuse me. Yeah, like Councillor Copeland said, I think it's an excellent report. Really enjoyed reading the historic bits in particular. Just a couple of questions. We're proposing a 6-week consultation period. Is that normal?
Yeah, for a document like this, that's a standard consultation period. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. And then just a couple of other things. Page 141 of the pack. We're talking about shop front signage, and it's saying historic shop fronts should be retained, and if unsympathetic alterations have been carried out in the past, these should be reversed wherever possible. And I'm actually very sympathetic to that. And when I first read it, I thought absolutely great. I'm just wondering though, if you're a retailer who's been clobbered by COVID, and we're going to ask them to change their signage, which has been there and perfectly legal for ages, what's the kind of thinking there?
So they would, if they were coming in for changes for new signage, we judge it on a case-by-case basis, but the intention is to preserve and enhance. So if you already have a modern shop front and you're just replacing on a like-for-like basis, we would try to push for kind of an improvement. But if that's not possible, then as long as it's not making the situation worse, as it were, then that would, so we wouldn't be looking for everyone to suddenly convert their shop fronts into kind of nice 19th century shop fronts. However, through the Union Street car scheme at the moment, there is a substantial amount of grant that you can apply for, so you can get 75% of the cost of improving your shop front improvement grants at the moment. So we would kind of go down the line of we can offer you a substantial grant to look to improve your shop front.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Another comment on the kind of the impact on business. There's a comment on page 144 of the pack about lots of bins in rear lanes. And again, I kind of look at the picture and I totally get what you're saying there. Just wondering about the impact on commercial premises.
Yeah. So the intention of the document is just to set out how the conservation area could be enhanced. Well, that section of the document is just to set out how the conservation area could be enhanced. There are wider planning considerations. This document is just one consideration. So the kind of the business would still have to have refuse collection that was fit for purpose. So although we are saying it would be preferred that the bins are reduced, that would need to be done in a manner that is still kind of people are still able to put their bins out. So
thanks again, that's helpful. And final one on page 151, in the bit that's headed key characteristics. We've got hanging baskets as a negative. I kind of quite like the hanging baskets in Golden Square.
I know I've had this discussion with a few people, to be honest. I appreciate that hanging baskets are, when they're in bloom, that they look fantastic and do contribute positively. However, the issue is with if they're put up indiscriminately, then you're drilling a lot of holes into granite stonework that is not necessarily controlled. So the people could be drilling into historic features. You've also got the issue of redundant brackets. If they then rust, you're then going to cause damage to the stonework with kind of the rusting fixture. So that's more the angle that I'm coming from. I'm not saying hanging baskets are bad by any stretch of the imagination, but the intention is just that if they're done to be done in a kind of in a considered manner, that they're put in kind of, they're used kind of not. They're not putting up a lot of hanging baskets for no reason. Like, there's a strategic approach to the kind of installation of hanging baskets.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I think that's me done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Anybody else? And no, I've not seen any more hands. Well done, Mr. Wilson, getting a plug in there for the cars regeneration. But yes, excellent. And I think what we've seen in terms of the hanging baskets, we've seen hanging baskets becoming more apparent on lampposts. So perhaps we can, look to that rather than, as you say, attaching them to buildings, because I did understand where you're coming from. I think one of the, for me, important additions to the area is certainly been the warehouses down at the harbour area, because I absolutely agree with you. You know, they need protection. That we've got very few left, and I absolutely think they add to that whole character of that area and the wider city centre. So I was really pleased to see that in. Absolutely delighted, obviously, that we'll make sure that we have this a very meaningful discussion with the Disability Equity Partnership, because what we want to do is we don't want to make anything that we're doing harder for them to access the city centre. So, you know, our awareness that they can raise can be very, very informing. But again, as I say, thank you for this report. We're obviously being asked at the recommendations at page 91(2). I'll just read them out again just for the recording. At 2.1, the committee is asked to approve the content of the draft city centre conservation area character appraisal, Appendix 1, and the proposed boundary changes, Appendix 2, for a minimum of 6 weeks period of public consultation. At 2.2, approves a minimum 6-week period of consultation on the processed regulation 11 direction, Appendix 3, the proposed city centre conservation area. And at 2.3, finally, instruct the Chief Officer of Strategic Place Planning to report the findings of the public consultation exercise back to a future meeting of this committee within 12 months. And I think it's important that we give officers the time to be able to analyse any responses and make the necessary adjustments if necessary. So I think that's why within the 12-month period, that with the obviously with the issue of COVID having an impact on officers' ability to maybe do as much as quickly as they would like. Can we just agree that, members? I think,
agreed.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody dissenting. As I say, thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your work on that. And as I say, it doesn't stop today. It just allows you to go out to consultation. And that might be an awful lot more work for you. So thank you very much. As I'd said, I was going to bring Mrs. Beattie in about the historic listed buildings, but we've already covered that at the planner. So really, there's nothing else other than to confirm the next date of the meeting, which will be Thursday, the 18th of February at 10 AM. So thank you all for your participation today. As I say, I know we've had some quite difficult decisions, particularly on item 1, but I think there was a very robust and mannerable debate over that. So you know, again, thank you, committee. You know, I think we always carry out our duties on this committee extremely well. So thank you for today, and look forward to seeing you, I'm sure, very soon. I've seen some of you on the LRB, so again, thank you for those who are contributing to that. Okay, have we stopped the recording?
Thanks.